Hello there guys, you're listening to Ebird Online and I'm back with another video. So as you know, the pesky Super Bowl derailed my activities this week for 90 Day Fiancé, so what I'm doing is giving you a few videos about things that I've been thinking about for a while, but I haven't had time to put a video together. So today I'm going to talk to you about Mike from Mike and Natalie, because there's something I'd like to draw everybody's attention to. It seems to me that with every passing episode, Mike's mouth pinches yet another lie. But because usually when Mike's on screen, Natalie's on screen, it all goes completely unnoticed. And the main reason for this is Natalie's disgraceful attitude towards Mike, and the way that she speaks to him and treats him is so bad that we overlook everything that Mike does. What does Mike do, I hear you ask? Let me elucidate. Mike is passive aggressive. And I've come to notice about 30 or 40% of things which we blame on Natalie, arguments and weird behaviour which is blamed on Natalie, is actually in the first instance down to Mike. Want to hear the evidence? I thought as much. Just before you do, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you enjoy these videos, and also please don't forget to press the like button. It does make a massive difference as to how my video is promoted in the algorithm for YouTube, so I would be eternally grateful, and a massive thank you to everybody that's subscribed thus far and to everybody that puts their thoughts in the comments section. Thank you so much. Right, so without further ado, I give you Mike's passive aggressive behaviour. Now Mike, as you know, applied for Natalie's K1 visa, but in the meantime, Natalie informed him that she didn't love him, and she threw his engagement ring back at him the last time he was in Ukraine. And although I'd rather wipe my bum on sandpaper than have a conversation with Natalie, right from the moment she landed on US soil, he's been giving her microaggressions, silent digs, and his general demeanour is one of passive-aggressive malignancy. Right, so disclaimer, just so that everybody's clear, I'm no Natalie fan. Just because one person in a couple is consistently wrong and consistently exhibits bad behaviour, it doesn't necessarily mean that the opposite person in the couple is innocent. And you only need to take one quick look down my comments page after a Mike and Natalie video and everybody comes out in support of Mike, because obviously Natalie's a night terror, and the prevailing view is that Natalie's a nag, Natalie's a moaner, Natalie's a complainer, and whilst this may be to some extent true, I think very often she's forced into nagging and over-complaining because of Mike's passive-aggressive nature. So just to define quickly, when someone's passive-aggressive, they regularly exhibit resistance to requests or demands, or they frustrate things by procrastinating or being stubborn. And as the name suggests, most of this is passive, and that's why it's so hard to spot. But what I want you to think about in this video is, how much does Mike contribute to the negativity that surrounds this relationship? Whilst it's clear that Natalie's the net contributor, it's my contention that Mike is not without fault. So the first point I want to draw to your attention is Uncle Beau. Obviously we saw the unceremonious dumping of Uncle Beau just before Natalie arrived in America. And let's not forget how Mike described Uncle Beau previously. He's a huge help. I love living with Uncle Beau, and I don't know what I'd do without him. That's how Mike described him. Now, as we know, Natalie and Mike had a chat over Skype, and Natalie said I'd prefer it if we didn't live with Uncle Beau. But Mike went absolutely out of his way to let us know that all of this was on Natalie, and it was all Natalie's fault. And instead of just saying to production and Uncle Beau, we have 90 days to decide whether to get married, we need time to ourselves to ascertain if we're going to fit together, if this can go forward. I'm really sorry, Beau. He said, I was forced to ask Uncle Beau to leave, and I feel really bad about this. And he later told production, I feel stuck in the middle. Oh Mike, even though the Ebird felt sorry for Uncle Beau, I have to admit, it was probably the only thing that you could have done to ask him to leave. Your house isn't particularly big, but you wanted the world to know all of this is down to Natalie. None of it's anything to do with me. I feel stuck in the middle. And the I feel stuck in the middle thing was a typical passive-aggressive statement. If you didn't want to kick Uncle Beau out, Uncle Beau would still be there. So let's face fact, it was more of a joint decision than just all on Natalie. And guys, it makes me laugh. Mike would have us all believe that Natalie was stood there with a Kalashnikov as his knackers. And so the next really obvious instance of Mike being passive-aggressive was when Natalie first arrived in the US and went to Mike's house. So when Natalie walked in, she said, oh my god, it's so cold. And she said, Mike, I'm absolutely freezing. And so Mike went very quiet, he raised his eyebrows, and then he looked at her and said, well, there's a whole bunch of snow outside. It gets cold in winter. Now guys, if anyone had said that to me, it's snowing outside, it gets cold in winter, I would think they were taking the piss. I honestly would think they were just being sarcastic. I don't give a crap what's happening outside. What about here, Mike? Inside, where I live. Oh Lord. And Natalie said, yeah, but it's cold inside. And again, he just went very quiet, he inclined his head to the side, and he very pointedly didn't want to answer. And he decided just to blank her. And he then took the decision to just blank her. So your partner has just moved country, she's left her family, her friends, her job, whatever behind. And upon coming into your house, she tells you, I'm cold. You should be going out of your way to say, yes, I acknowledge it's cold. Let's get this sorted. Let me get the fire on. Let me make sure you're nice and warm. Or at the very minimum, here, Natalie, have a blanket. Oh no, Mike's put out because Natalie's quite rightly cold. And I gotta tell you guys, it didn't look too warm there to me. And so the effect this has on Natalie is an accumulative one. So she walked in, the house was slightly dirty, not really dirty, but kind of dirty, kind of uninviting. And we discover later in this same scene, she asks him for a cup of tea and he said, yeah, I'm not even really sure if we have any. He knows she drinks tea. He knows from when he's in Ukraine. So he's ill prepared for her as well. So he's basically been massively inhospitable, and the lack of response to Natalie being cold is one major example of this. And so later on, when Natalie has a sulk and a little strop, we all say, oh my god, Natalie, she's out of order. But it's these little passive aggressive things, these little microaggressions, which all combined, I think, sends Natalie off the deep end. And for me, what really summed the whole thing up was later on when Mike was talking to producers and he said, I'm sure it's much colder in Ukraine than it is here. Mike, Natalie lives in a brick-built house, more than likely with central heating. When you live in a country where it's cold all of the time, you tend to have central heating. 86% of all homes in the UK are centrally heated. Why? Because it's always bloody cold. I can only imagine it's similar in Ukraine. But that's not the worst thing about this. The worst thing about this is you're not denying that it's cold, Mike. At no point did Mike say, no, it's not cold, or I can't feel it. But neither did he acknowledge, Natalie, you're cold. Even if Mike wasn't cold, it doesn't mean that Natalie's not cold. Women are quite often colder than men. And so ostensibly what Mike was saying is, I don't really mind that you're cold, Natalie. It's no big deal to me. In fact, I'm more peed off because it seems as if you don't like my house. If you love somebody and they've just travelled halfway around the world and uprooted their life to be with you, don't you think the least thing that you could do is make them as comfortable as possible? But in a very passive way, Mike's saying, yeah, I don't really care. And so the next example involves unnecessary procrastinating. What should have been a very simplistic conversation was dragged out for absolutely ages, and again, Natalie was characterised as the irritant. And so a week or two in, Natalie and Mike were having breakfast and Natalie said, would it be possible to have half of the dresser? All my clothes are in my suitcase and I'd like to unpack. And Mike said initially, yeah, sure, no problem. And he also said, you can have half of the wardrobe as well. And she said, thank you, love. And by rights, that should have been it. Mike should have just emptied the drawers. Case closed. Oh no, not for Pam. Passive-aggressive Mike. That's too easy. That would be just too simple. Mike then said to Natalie, well, you know, you can hang your clothes. Hang them for the time being. And Natalie said, no, I've got jerseys and underwear and so on. I've got things that I want to put in a dresser. And he said, well, if you hang your clothes, it stays straight and there are no wrinkles. Mike, Natalie knows what hanging your clothes is. They do have wardrobes in Ukraine. And she said, I've only got a couple of dresses and things that need hanging. I'd rather just put my stuff in drawers. I just want some drawers. And Mike became more sinister. He said, well, there is a lot more closet space here than at your house, so you have the opportunity to hang your clothes. Guys, I was absolutely tearing my hair out at this because he managed not one, but two little microaggressions in one sentence. Mike's getting good. Mike's quite the pro. And so he managed to say, there's more space here. Mike, what's your point? She hung clothes at home. She can hang clothes here. What's your actual point? Your real point is, my house is bigger than yours. How pathetic. And the second microaggression he got there was still saying, why don't you just hang your clothes? I.e., why don't you do the thing which means I don't have to move anything out of my drawers and I have no intention right now of giving you what you want. Even though I've already said, yeah, no problem in my initial statement. Why are you still talking about it if there's no problem? And so of course Natalie did her usual switch to bitch. But who can blame her? What she's asking for is very, very standard as far as I'm concerned. And he finished off by saying, what, you don't like hanging clothes? For God's sake, Mike, just give her the bloody drawers. And Natalie's now understandably very stroppy. Mike walks slowly over to his drawers, takes loads of stuff out of his drawers, puts them on top of his drawers. He didn't even try and put them elsewhere. And then said, there we go, you can start unpacking now because they're ready. Natalie said, I'd like to wipe the drawers out first. And he rolled his eyes again. What for, Mike? And it was very interesting at the end of this little interlude, because Natalie said to production, I don't know what the problem is. Maybe it's a very easy task, and maybe I make it too complicated. I don't understand. But guys, look what I found here. Look what I discovered. And I missed this completely the first time I looked. Watch what Mike does when Natalie kisses him to thank him for agreeing to clear out 3 drawers. And I think this little gesture just strengthens my case. And so my very next example is when Natalie and Mike were going hiking, and Natalie's face was made up and she was putting moisturiser on her hands, and Mike said, it stinks of grapefruit, and he looked at Natalie and started laughing and said, we're going hiking. You got a whole bunch of makeup on there. And Natalie said, well, it's just lipstick and a little bit of concealer because I've got dark circles under my eyes. And she said, what, you accuse me that it's bad or something? What's the problem? And Mike said, I'm just saying. And she said, I don't understand. Do you disapprove of it? What's the problem? And he said, it's just that, well, you know what I mean. I'm just saying. No, we don't know what you mean, Mike. What's the issue? Pray tell.
So you accuse me that it's bad or what?
Just saying, you know what I mean?
Did you get the problem?
Just saying, yeah, no, I understand. I was just saying,
And I have 2 problems with this. The first one, quite obvious. What Natalie decides to put on Natalie's face and when she decides to do it is Natalie's and Natalie's business alone. Loads of people in my comments when I mentioned this last week said, she's going hiking, you don't need makeup to hike. Newsflash, you never need makeup. You don't need makeup to go to a nightclub. You don't need makeup to go to a restaurant. You never ever need makeup, you choose makeup. Shock horror, it isn't like food or water, it isn't one of life's essentials. And I personally think it's disgusting trying to shame a woman for trying to improve herself. And society has set us up in a way that we're not confident sometimes without makeup. Natalie wants to be married to Mike, she wants to look good for Mike, he knows this, and he's ridiculing her and laughing in her face. Mike has absolutely no right to dictate what Natalie does. Mike, if you don't like makeup, you don't have to wear it. And my second problem with this is that Mike didn't even have the bollocks to follow through with his initial laugh in her face and then, you're wearing a whole bunch of makeup, He didn't have the bollocks to actually say, I think you shouldn't wear makeup, or I don't want you to wear makeup. Again, it's passive aggressive. He knew very well if he said, Natalie, take your makeup off, or Natalie, next time don't bother with the makeup. Or, Natalie, why did you put makeup on? There's literally no need to have it on. If he said it in so many words, he'd look like the bad guy. And as all passive-aggressive little twonks do, he wants to dance around it, to insinuate it, but never to actually say it, for that would make him look terrible. Don't worry, Mike, your clothes already do that. Mike, how would you like it if I decided to go in on you? Mike's not going hiking up the hill, he's lumbering up the hill. Lovely haircut, Mike. Do you get a free bowl of soup with that? Mike's just simply awful. And awfully simple. Yep, I can keep on coming, but I won't. I'll save some for next week, Mike. And then what happens next? We know what happens next. Natalie decides to ignore Mike. And then Mike says to production, Natalie's got an on and off switch. 1 minute she loves me, the next minute she doesn't love me. He said, I'm just trying to figure her out. I don't understand her sometimes. It's just been an ongoing thing. Mike, you know exactly why she's not speaking to you at this point, because you've just told her her hands are slimy and greasy after she simply moisturised them, and you also said, why are you wearing a whole bunch of makeup? Oh, no reason, not saying anything, no comment, just saying. And I know it's difficult with a low IQ, but stop playing dumb. And my final example for this video is when they were in the shop looking for linen spray, and Natalie saw some napkins and she said, Mike, what about these for the wedding? And Mike absolutely ignored her completely, and he went and grabbed 2 Scotch decanters and said, these are what I want, these are, yeah, I'm definitely getting these. And he was fake excited about getting these decanters. Mike, you live in a yard sale. Decanters cannot help you at this point. They really can't. And Natalie had obviously asked him a question and she was just stood there in front of the shop assistant looking real stupid. And then Natalie said, well, we have to discuss this. We haven't got much time, the clock's ticking. And Mike said, "That's it, I'm going. I'm not going to stand around and debate this." And this is what a passive-aggressive person does. Ostensibly, they're avoiding conflict, but in fact they're provoking one. His lack of communication with Natalie is basically taunting her, goading her. And he knows this whole wedding and ring and so on is playing on her mind. And instead of saying to her, which he could have done, "Natalie, I don't want to discuss it here. We're going to talk about this when we get home," he threw his toys out of the pram. He first pretended he wanted to spend his money on something else. "We haven't got money for a wedding, but I've got money for pointless decanters." And then the next step was, "Right, that's it, I'm leaving." And he left without paying for anything in the store. And so it's also then a punishment. You're not even getting the linen spray that you came here for. And he did express to Natalie, "I don't really want a wedding, I just want a ceremony, but I know that you want your mum to come." And she said, "That's fine, let's have something small, but we still have to plan." And I have to admit, you still do have to plan. If you're having somebody over for bloody Sunday lunch, you need to plan. But all of these things, I think, leave Natalie feeling very discombobulated. And as we see, once Natalie feels unsure of herself, what does she do? She goes on the attack. And Natalie's got one slick tongue, and don't get me wrong, she goes far OTT, and she says some things which should never be expressed and should never be said. But like I say, Mike's passive-aggressive nature doesn't help things at all. So guys, let me know what you think. Do you think that Mike's secretly passive-aggressive? Or do you think that he behaves this way as a reaction to Natalie's behaviour or Natalie's demeanour? Whichever way, please put it in the comments. And what's your take on Mike always framing Natalie as an unpredictable weirdo? He says, "She's got an on-off switch and I never know what I've done." There have been 3 times he's mentioned this on-off switch, and each and every time I can tell him within seconds why she stopped speaking to him. It's very clear. He's not stupid. I'm very sure he knows why she's not speaking as well. So why are you trying to pretend to everybody that you have no clue? Because you're passive-aggressive. So guys, let me know what you think in comments, and I'll be back very soon with another video. Please, if you've yet to do so, don't forget to press that big red subscribe button and make Ebird a very happy Ebird. You've been listening to Ebird Online. Thank you so much for listening, and I bid you good day.